G'day folks, my name is Rob. Welcome back to another F1 Fantasy video. Today we are looking at the launch of the official Formula One fantasy game for 2024. We're going to unpack all of the new changes to the game and review the prices assigned to drivers and constructors for the new season. So if you're new around here, you want to be subscribed to more F1 fantasy content for the upcoming season, be sure to do so and throw the video a like while you're at it. So I'll get straight into the updates for the game this season. There's been two major ones in terms of gameplay for 2024. The first is the chip modification for no negative. Now, this was a bit of a polarizing chip in 2023 purely because it was quite speculative in terms of its outcome. It wasn't very easy to predict how your drivers would fare and whether or not the chip would pay off. When I used it, it didn't work out whatsoever. But essentially, the no negative chip would retroactively adjust a total score for a driver or constructor that finished less than 0 to 0 points. This season, instead, the no negative is applied to each scoring category that attracts points less than 0. So if you made overtakes during the race, but you finished with a DNF, you'd still get points for the overtake, but that minus 20, which would be attributed for not finishing the race, would be removed. So for instance, if you made 5 overtakes, you made qualifying P10, you got a point there, you made up a couple of positions in the race, you'd still score 7, 8, 9 points, but that minus 20 would ultimately not be assigned to your final score for a driver. So that's essentially the genesis of the no negative chip. But I guess we will see how that shakes out in races throughout the season once people start to use it. In terms of the other big change to the game, this was the increase in the points penalty for transfers made by players, increasing from -4 to -10 for every additional transfer above the 2 free transfers we get every single race week. So I think that's a really positive change. I definitely thought the -4 was too conservative. So I think with the increase to -10, it certainly creates an element of strategy as to whether or not that extra transfer is worth it, and definitely also means we have to potentially plan out over a longer period of time whether or not that transfer will pay off if we're taking a hit for it, as well as the fact that it increases the value of the utility of the wild card, which was, in my opinion, essentially redundant last season, just because of the fact that with the -4, it was so easy to get in drivers and constructors as we needed to. So I think increasing the points penalty for the transfers to -10 is a very positive change, and I really look forward to seeing whether or not that sways our decision-making process with extra transfers heading into the new season. But I don't want to get too caught up in any of the other kind of semantics of scoring and whatnot. All of it for that matter, has stayed the same, so nothing really to unpack here. But if you want to go through the point scoring, feel free to do so in your own time. I assume a lot of you watching this video are returning for another season, so anything I say here is probably not news to you. But I thought we'd also use this video to go through my team selection, pull together a couple of different drafts, and see which drivers we think were overpriced, fairly priced, and underpriced. So at the moment, as you can see on the screen here, this is what I've got for my first pass of a draft for my fantasy team. I think Max, for me, the obvious candidate to come onto my team purely because of the fact that DRS boost, a 2 times point multiplier that we assign to any driver in our team each race week, is a sure thing on Max. He's the best driver, he's going to be in the best car, and he's a 3-time world champion. So I fully expect $30 million is fairly priced, almost a third of our team budget. But given the fact that the old bloke is going to be scoring pretty much the top score just about every week, it seems very, very logical for me to get him into my team. I really like the Ferrari coverage. Charles had a really strong finish to 2023. I'm very optimistic about that Ferrari car. I think he will absolutely, and I'm confidently saying this, will finish inside the top 4 in the World Drivers' Championship this season. So I think he's really looking to make some serious headway, rival Max, Lando, Lewis for the championship. Whether or not he's got a championship run in him is another thing altogether, but I definitely think he's a proven commodity. He's got explosive fantasy potential, and certainly when that Ferrari is working and the team strategy is reliable, he's definitely one of, if not the fastest people on the track. So a big fan of Leclerc. Yuki Tsunoda, Racing Bulls, 2 Racing Bulls coverage assets there. I think Racing Bulls taking parts from the RB19 from last season is going to benefit the car and the performance of both drivers in their team. Gasly, I really like him. I think Alpine are underpriced, and I'll get to that in a minute. Very consistent, a favorite of mine. Always really liked his performances coming off the back of a podium in the Dutch Grand Prix and a sprint race podium in 2023. And then Alex Albon, I think, again, another driver, perhaps a little underpriced. We saw his true potential shine through in 2023, and I really like the pace of that Williams. They're on the up and up with James Vowles at the helm. So I definitely think Alex Albon at $7 million is probably going to be a popular pick as we get closer to the start of the season. Now, before we get into a couple of different team builds, I just want to quickly touch on a few different drivers and constructors and their prices assigned by F1. I won't go through every single one, just the ones that I think are worth talking about for a little bit. I've obviously talked about Max. I think 30 million, very fair. One of the highest owned drivers, if not, close to the highest owned driver at the moment. But I think given he is a certain lock just about for DRS boost every single week, it makes sense that his ownership is going to be that high. Given it's 48% at the time of recording, I wouldn't even be surprised if that creeps up a little bit more. And then that may suggest 30 million could even be a bargain for Max Verstappen if we've got anything to go by in 2023. So definitely equitably priced at the moment, but we'll have to see how the rest of the top teams, McLaren, Ferrari, Mercedes, all shake out in preseason testing. McLaren is an interesting one. I really think they've been a little hard done by. Lando Norris is the second highest priced driver in the game at 23 million. I definitely think he's one to watch, but to be more than 3 million compared to Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc for a driver that's yet to win a race, and I'm confident he will win one this season, but I still think 23 million is probably a little high for my liking, particularly given the caliber of the drivers around him. I think McLaren have got reason to be optimistic. The McLaren looked very good last season, certainly in the second half of last season, and I fully expect they're going to be challenging Red Bull for the constructors. But I think Red Bull are just too good over the course of an entire season. I wouldn't be surprised if Lando finishes inside the top 3 in the World Drivers' Championship, but I still think 23 million is probably a little on the pricey side. And his teammate, Oscar Piastri, at 19 million, priced 0.1 million less than Charles and 0.3 million less than Lewis, more than both George Russell and Sainz, also race winners. I think Oscar Piastri, again, McLaren will be competitive, but I think Piastri is probably about 3 million more than I expected, 2 to 3 million more than I expected he'd come in at. So the McLaren assets, the constructor as well, a little on the higher side for my liking. I think there's more value to be found elsewhere, certainly around those price points. But again, if they are as competitive as they're expected to be, then you never know. Maybe they'll prove us wrong. But for right now, I don't really see myself running any McLaren assets in Bahrain, unless, of course, Oscar and Lando are 1 and 2 in testing. Perez, I think probably fair, to be honest, but one of the lowest owned assets. Not sure he's going to be in my team after his error-riddled 2023 campaign. I really like the value Lewis and Charles are both offering. I've got my eyes on both Ferrari and Mercedes in preseason. I really want to see if both of those cars are going to be up the front. Both proven drivers, multiple race winners, or in Lewis's case, multiple championship winner. But I think, as you can see on the screen here, I really like the flexibility that 19 million. I mean, I really could also get Lewis Hamilton in the team as well if I wanted to. So I really like that flexibility. You're able to pivot between both of these drivers. Talked about Oscar, George and Carlos, I think similarly priced and deservedly so. Aston Martin, I think Fernando's at a bit of an awkward price point, so I'm not so sure he's going to be in my team unless I'm compromising on other parts of the team, which I'm not so set on at the moment. Racing Bulls, Visa Carb, whatever you want to call them, I am very high on, before we get to testing. I'd happily be proven wrong, but they've got an experienced driver pairing. They're taking parts from the RB19 for 2024. Upgrades looked really good in the second half of last season, and with a full season for Daniel Ricciardo to work towards, I definitely think these guys could be value for money picks at that price. Again, given my cost cap constraints, I've gone with Yuki. I think you can't go wrong with either of them. I'm not sure if people are loving Daniel so much because his ownership's so high. Maybe he is. I thought maybe he'd be priced another million more than Yuki, purely for popularity. I think on balance, Daniel's a better driver than Yuki, but I wouldn't say the disparity in price between the two should be that much. So both very solid assets to own at that price. But I think the most undervalued assets in the game at the moment are the Alpine duo. The French connection in Pierre Gasly and Esteban Ocon at 7.8 apiece. Again, two drivers that I think should be priced pretty similarly based on their capabilities. Gasly at 51%, very surprised by that, but I think because of the fact Ocon had a championship leading 7 DNFs in 2023, that's probably scared away a few suitors. I still think it's 7.8, that's exceptional value. So, if Alpine do string together a few times in testing that look the goods and in the lead up to Bahrain are encouraging, then I fully expect they could be back on the menu this season. But I think between the two of them, I just like Gasly. Both of them were podium winners last season, on the podium last season. So I think, both ones to watch, but I'm more of a Gasly fan than an Ocon fan. So for me, if I'm picking between the two, I'm going Pierre. Alex Albon, as I said, 7 million. I think that's pretty good value. I'm not really touching anyone else. I don't think the Sauber duo really offers a lot of excitement. Joe's priced more than Bottas, which I actually think is probably fair. And then I wouldn't go near Haas at all. They're expected to be the slowest car in Bahrain. And with a new team principal, very few resources. I'm really not sure if they're a pick at all. And then same goes for Logan Sargent. Surprise, his ownership's up at 18%, certainly outstripping the Haas duo, Joe, Esteban Ocon even. So I guess he is an enabler of sorts at 5.5, but I wouldn't be touching Logan Sargent for the time being. There's not a lot to get excited about at the moment. In terms of constructors, I think that's also really interesting. The biggest storyline for me is that it is arguably impossible to afford a two constructor powerhouse lineup, unless of course you're bidding off Max. Now, let's say you went for Red Bull and Ferrari. That would leave you $30 million to use between these two slots. And that's even with a Pierre, Yuki, Alex Albon lineup, which I think are the most consistent drivers below 10 million. 30 million doesn't get you a lot. So you're really having to compromise on drivers if you're trying to pull in a constructor. And I think realistically, you have to have one of Max, Lando, Lewis, or Charles as your number one driver for the DRS boost. Anyone else, it just doesn't seem to make sense. So if you're getting in Charles, for instance, there's still really not a lot to choose from. Lance Stroll to fill out, let's say, the remaining. That's just not a team that inspires a lot of confidence in me, particularly with Perez as well. His struggles last season. That's what dissuades me from wanting to go for Red Bull this season in the constructor slot for now. But again, if Perez Max are 1-2 the whole way through testing and FP 1-3 in Bahrain, then again, my stance on that may change. But right now, I'm leaning Ferrari. Mercedes, similar price point. Really like the value both of these constructors offer. And then I think, the second slot, if we're assuming we're bringing in Max, which I think is must own just about for anyone watching this video and playing this game, you have to go for a value constructor in Alpine, Aston Martin, or RB. I think for me, my pick is RB just because of the fact of those upgrades I talked about. If Alpine, I think they're going to be a bit slow if I'm being honest, but if Alpines somehow look competitive in testing, then there's certainly very much a case to be made to pivot between the two. They're pretty much identical in price, so I really like that. Aston Martin's just a bit of an awkward price point. If you get them in here, there's really 14 million, and below Alonso, there's 5 million in price difference between him and Stroll. I don't know what's going on here. It's not really a team I like. And Aston Martin, not so sure. I know they've got their new factory and they had a blockbuster start to 2023. I'm not so sure they're able to replicate that this go around. So I think there's a lot of value that you could unlock in Racing Bulls, in Alpine, as that second constructor. To be honest, I wouldn't touch Sauber, Williams, or Haas at all. All of those cars are going to be extremely slow. I know Albon outperformed it all of last season, the Williams. But I don't think in terms of a constructor with Logan Sargent, the other driver, there's really anything to get excited about there either. So I think my pick at the moment is going to be Racing Bulls, maybe Alpine, but it's got to be between those two for me at the moment. And I really like the build I've got here with Charles as the number 2 driver. Bit of versatility between the two if you want to pivot your DRS boost between either of them. I'm just very content with the lineup at the moment. As I said before, similar price point for Mercedes. You could potentially get them in. Throw in Carlos Sainz in the second driver slot instead, or George Russell. That might mean dropping someone like Albon down or Tsunoda down. But I think this has got a really nice look to it as well. McLaren, I'm not so sure that the value's there for the constructor. So I would be steering clear of Lando, Oscar, and the McLaren constructor for the time being. But I'm fairly confident, unless we see, as I said, anything surprising in preseason, these two assets are probably going to be in my team to start things off, and then we'll build the rest of the team around what is revealed in testing. But I thought I'd just get a little bit of a download on how the team is shaping up at the moment and all the news and headlines coming from the F1 fantasy game that's just recently launched. So if you guys like what you see, you've got any other team constructions underway that I haven't listed out here, be sure to drop that in the comments below, because I think the 2 weeks between now and the deadline, 1 week between now and testing, there's going to be a lot of chopping and changing, a lot of optionality, and I think the game's in a really good place. The pricing is, I think, just about spot on. There's going to be a lot of variety and a lot of people going in different directions with how they build out their team. So I think this is probably the best state the game has been in since I've played it. I've been playing it for 3 years now, going into my 4th. So I think it's looking really good. Just a couple of tweaks, and I think we'll be all the way there. So as I said, drop any comments below on other team builds you've been thinking about, but I'll be back with another video hopefully in the next few days. But if you like that one, as I said, drop a like on the video, subscribe to the channel for more F1 fantasy content. Thank you guys for dropping by, and I'll see you all very soon.